Hello, hello. The
Hi.
doctor,
Doctor is in.
the doctor is in. Oh my goodness, it's so good. Look at all these gorgeous smiles. It's so beautiful to see you beautiful Black people on this Wellness Wednesday, this Woosah
Right.
Wednesday. Oh, how y'all feeling?
I'm feeling
Great.
great. I'm feeling great. It's my birthday eve,
I
so
know. I'm
I
so
know
excited.
I'm ready to celebrate. But we have such a great show. You know, I say that every week, but we have a great show. We have these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Black women,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
we have Dr. Stephanie McCoy, who
Hi.
and she has a lot of letters after her name. I don't know what she really means, so she can explain that. But she is our guru, research guru from Susan G. Komen Foundation, one of our partners. And then we have our beautiful breasty Karen Sock, and she's been on the show before. But
Hello.
this
How's
is
everybody?
this is what metastatic breast cancer looks like. Okay.
Look at that smile. Look at that gorgeous smile. I love it. This is what metastatic breast cancer looks like. Looks like living. Looks like
Yes,
living to the fullest.
absolutely.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Well, we're excited to talk about this tonight. Susan G. Komen did participate in and conduct a study called In My Own Voice. Is that correct, Dr. Stephanie?
That's correct. Mhm.
And I would love it if you would introduce yourself and all the letters behind your name. Don't you leave one of them out. Tell people where you're from, where you're at, and give us a little bit of the background on the study. And then we'll invite Karen to come and share her story as well.
Sure. As you all said, I'm Dr. Stephanie McCoy. You can call me Stephanie because this is girl chat, so that's totally fine. I'm in Dallas Fort Worth, originally from Little Rock, Arkansas. That's where I've received all my formal training. So those letters are the PhD, the Master's in Public Health, Master of Public Service, and I went to Hendrix College, which is a small liberal arts college in Arkansas. And I'm really passionate about health equity across the spectrum. I started in mental health and in faith communities, and how we in Black communities conceptualize mental health and how those disparities persist. And so I just transitioned to the breast cancer space, which is honestly really similar. There's still a lot of stigma in Black communities, there's a lot of inequities. And so, In My Own Voice was just an opportunity to hear from the communities that are experiencing those persistent disparities, specifically Black women living with metastatic breast cancer. And so, over a period of 3 years, we were able to bring in 51 African American women living with metastatic breast cancer for focus group discussions about their experiences. So, we talked about their barriers to care, all of the different side effects that they've experienced with treatment, how they're coping with it, and how they're advocating for breast health equity. And so a lot of what we learned was how Komen could be better allies for this community, but then also how the broader community and policy in the healthcare space can really make better outcomes for this community. So I'm really excited to share. Karen was one of the first participants, and she's helped plan the rest of the events, and she's really integrated into Komen. And so I'm really excited that she can help elevate the stories of this community.
Thanks.
What's
I'm
interesting, Stephanie, is that you guys started this work before the whole COVID disparity thing happened, right? That
Right.
the one thing good about COVID is to put it on the table. But you guys started this work 3 years ago, before all that started. So, at least that's a great thing, and it's something that the world needs to deal with. So now's a really good time to put it on the table and let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, COVID presented a lot of challenges, but also opportunities. So when we first started, like you said, in 2018, we were in Dallas, and then in 2019, we went to Los Angeles. And in 2020, I mean, I'm a classic behavioral scientist. I like to get in a room with focus group and hug people
And
and
help
talk to
people,
people.
yeah, talk.
But now we're online. But what we found was that really broadened the opportunity, because, when you're talking about people who are living with metastatic breast cancer, I mean, day to day is unpredictable sometimes. Travel is a lot. And so being able to access more people was actually a benefit of the pandemic.
Mhm.
Yeah, we've learned that from just being on our show,
Mhm.
meeting people. So, yeah. So Karen, my bestie, I love you.
Well, good evening to everyone. I'm Karen Sock, and I live in Biloxi, Mississippi. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and I've lived with metastatic breast cancer since March of 2015. I fell on a trip on a wet floor when I walked on a rainy day into Walmart, and I suffered for 9 months before the doctor finally figured out, hey, you know what, you need an MRI. And then we found out that I did indeed have metastatic breast cancer that had really eaten away my number 6 vertebrae in my neck. And, you know, I went to an oncologist, local oncologist who I see today. She's a great lady. And she sent me to the oncology neurosurgeon and the radiologist, and he said, you know, we need to operate on you right away. And my husband was on his way from out of town. So we decided, when he said, don't do anything till I get there. And, you know, when you hear the diagnosis, you're so emotionally charged that a lot of times the patient doesn't hear anything else. And so I had the calm of my husband, who is a very detailed and linear thinker. And he said, calm down. We're going to go for a second opinion. So we went to Ohio, my home state, and 4 miles from where our daughter lived, who's our only child. She's an adult now. 4 miles from her was the research institute. And she insisted that we come stay with her and go there. And that neurosurgeon said, Karen, you're young. You don't have diabetes. You don't have heart disease. I'd like you to take a journey with me. So we're going to give you letrozole, and I want you to come back in 3 months. Came back in 3 months. He said, 3 more months, come back. In 6 months, the tumor had really become much smaller, and new bones began to generate around the perimeter of the tumor. And I was not in pain. No chemo, no radiation. And I was doing what I needed to do, and that is living life to the fullest. So I'm extremely grateful for that. And I have a very full life. Now, is it perfect in terms of suffering with pain in my joints and that kind of thing? Of course not. But it's manageable and bearable. And I try very hard to focus on living and not on those things that are negative. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I love it. And what an amazing story it is, because I think so many women are still grappling with some of the things that, you know, you had some help. Your husband said, you know what, honey, calm down. We're going to get a second opinion. How did you feel about that? And were you okay, or were you apprehensive about that at first?
No, I wasn't apprehensive because I live in a state where we don't have a lot of research institutions near me, number one. And number two, I was from Ohio, and my daughter, you know, obviously I trust what she has to say. And it just really, I felt really protected with my husband and daughter when I went to my home state to a research institution that focuses only on breast cancer. So I felt like I was getting the best possible care.
Wow. Do you think you would have felt similarly had you not told your family? I know we talk a little bit about people who are not comfortable sharing their diagnosis. Maybe give us a little bit of the strength and the power of telling that to your family. How does that feel for you, and how can other people make sense of that?
Well, I think that your family deserves to know. I know it's difficult for them. In many cases, it's more difficult for the family to deal with your diagnosis than it is for you to deal with it, because they're concerned about losing you. And some people manage stress much better than other people. And I know my husband and daughter, they don't manage stress well, but I manage stress really well. So when I first found out about it, my husband was here when the doctor called. And I think that because I am pretty strong and optimistic about what was going to happen on this path and this journey, that it helped them not to be so crazy. But telling other people, including your family, but also your network, is liberating and reassuring. So I have a number of friends and family members, including my dad. He's 89 years old, and he always encourages me to keep going. He says how proud he is, you know. So I mean, that means a lot to me. I have sisters. My one sister has a master's degree. She's 64 years old, and she had never gone for a mammogram until I insisted last year. And I'm sure she's like a 38D. She has big, dense breasts. And I just thought to myself, are you serious? And so it took some pressure, but she finally went.
Wow.
Karen is an advocate, y'all. She is advocating all the time for everyone to do what's right about their breast health.
kidding. That's a powerful testimony right there.
That's what it takes. That's what it takes. You know, it's almost like you have to have someone you know with a firsthand experience to. I mean, I still trying to get my sister to get a preventative mastectomy, and she won't hear it. But I'm
Wow.
there with your girlfriend. But so Stephanie, do you want to share some of the stuff that you guys learned in the study that we should be thinking about, and then we can kind of talk through it in real time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to spend so much time admiring the problem, but I will present. I have some notes about what the problem is just to lay the foundation, right? So a lot of what people talked about first was the impact of metastatic breast cancer. And there were several categories of what that looked like. A lot of people talked about the financial part of it. And so the financial toxicity that comes with treatment is itself, you know, sometimes unbearable. You're making a decision between whether or not you can eat or you can afford your treatment, especially in situations where people had no insurance or were underinsured. And then also the stuff that's associated, the indirect stuff with actually receiving treatment. So being able to take off time from work, being able to have transportation to get to your treatment, having childcare, having food to eat while you're sometimes, you know, far away from home, being able to stay somewhere, having lodging. Those were things that really were really strong impacts that people talked about. Also the physical side effects, and Karen, maybe you can speak more to this, but the neuropathy, the bone and muscle pain, loss of appetite, hair loss, any of the sexual side effects that sometimes, especially in Black communities where we already don't talk about sex, being able to share comfortably with your healthcare provider about what's happening and what's not normal or where you feel uncomfortable with. Also the psychological side effects of being diagnosed, but then also the isolation, not feeling like in some cases, Karen, you talked to your family, but lots of women said, you know, nobody knows. And so they were very clear with us, you can't share any pictures, you can't talk about me publicly because my family doesn't even know about this. And not having anyone to talk to, also being in situations where they were the only person in their cancer treatment center or in their community who had breast cancer. They had never seen another person of color, less likely a Black woman, living with metastatic breast cancer. So not having that shared experience was something that was a real big impact. And then also the changes in interpersonal relationships. So in some situations, people didn't feel comfortable talking to their family and friends. And in some situations they did. And those dynamics either changed or they ended relationships. We heard people talking about, you know, marriages ending, you know, losing contact with children because people just weren't able to deal with the diagnosis or understand what the differences would be. So those are some of the major challenges that we kept hearing.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, let's break them down. Let's talk about sex.
I love it.
Well, you know, a lot of people won't talk about the subject, but I think it's really important because, I mean, here you have issues with your bones and you're married and both of you still want to be intimate. So you got to figure it out. I mean, one lady her husband broke her hip. And so initially my husband was really afraid that he was going to hurt me. So we had to, you know, talk about that and get a little creative, but he's still my husband. I always tell my daughter, your dad is still my boyfriend. She always says, I think I'm throwing up a little bit. So
How many years have you been married? How many years?
I've been married for 36 years. And so, you know, so that is an important part of any relationship when you're married to someone is that sexual intimacy. And you gotta talk about it. And hopefully you have a relationship with other women that you can help them understand how to navigate this really sensitive topic. Then to your point, Stephanie, when you talked about the interpersonal relationships, I have a friend that participates in a fundraiser that we do for the United Way. It's called the CEO Talent Show. And he's a big guy. He's about 6'8". He's a minister. He runs the Kroc Center. And he hadn't seen me in a long time. And when I went to see him and I took him a box of cookies, he said, I was afraid to see you because I did not know what you're going to look like. So when people hear metastatic breast cancer, they think they're going to see somebody who's looking like they have leprosy. And there's a whole range of what the what the disease is doing to us and as individuals. And in my case, I mean, my hair is natural now because in COVID, I couldn't go get it done. So then I decided, well, what the heck, I might as well leave it natural. But I was fortunate not to lose any hair. Other people do lose their hair. And nowadays, many young women are just shaving their hair as a part of fashion. So you don't know by looking at someone what's going on in their lives, but people do have preconceived notions, and some of them can't deal with the emotion of seeing someone that they know well or love going through this type of journey.
Wow.
Mhm.
You said a lot, and I'm so glad that you brought up sex and intimacy because, some of the medications that we give to patients, we don't talk enough about the side effects of those. Those estrogen blockers, for example, the hormone blockers cause vaginal dryness, right? And so we just prescribe and we go on and on and thinking the patients are, being compliant with it. And some patients won't say that they're not taking it because it causes such severe side effects. And so it's something that we have to sort of learn to, especially as physicians, we have to learn to bring these up first because patients aren't going to always bring this up. Everybody's not a Karen, and they're not going to be like, listen, can we talk about sex here and intimacy? And can we talk about my bone health? And so if the doctor doesn't say, how you doing? Are you having good intimacy? Are you getting laid? Patients are thinking, okay, well, I guess I just won't say anything. And then maybe that's just another thing that cancer took from me.
And there's natural lubricants that you can use. I mean, coconut oil, it's all kind of things that you can use that are natural to make sure that you're lubricated. My husband gets so embarrassed when we go to the doctor because I bring it up in front of her all the time, and he always says, "I'm out of here." And she just cracks up laughing, but it's important.
Hey, girl, you guys say it. You guys say it.
And what if you're single? Because we don't
Right.
talk enough to people who are not partnered about what to do in the interim either. You feel uncomfortable in your body, and you may not feel like your best, most sexy self. And so talking about self-pleasure and self-stimulation, all those things that's taboo, those of us who are raised in the church, we don't go there. We don't like to talk about that stuff, but we absolutely have to, and surround ourselves with a group of women who can relate to it and give you tips and tricks. So, I tell you, the internet has been a wonderful thing during the era of COVID because people have been connected and having these amazing conversations like never
Yes.
before.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I was afraid to have sex with my husband, because I was afraid he was going to give me something and wreck my chemo. Like I was afraid I was
Oh,
going to get
wow.
germs in my body
Wow.
that I didn't want. You know what I mean? And so okay, I'll have to go to plan B, figure it out for myself, because I was afraid.
hmm
I also had a rocky relationship too, so I didn't feel safe.
That makes sense. I would have never thought of that.
Yeah, but
Something else you brought up, Dr. Stephanie, you talked about financial toxicity. Can you explain what that is and how that impacts patients?
Let me read this quote. I was going to share this quote and we'll put it in the chat. One of the participants said, when you're working on a fixed income, you're trying to figure out, am I going to pay for my ramen noodles this month? Or am I going to pay for my medications for my cancer? It's expensive. And so there's levels to that quote, right? We're talking about how much is the package of ramen noodles now? 25 cents. So we're talking about a very inexpensive meal that may not get paid for if I choose to do this treatment. So the financial toxicity was just, having to make decisions. So many people said, I didn't even choose to go to my doctor because I didn't even want to see what the bill was going to be. So having to make decisions about choosing care or not choosing care based on whether or not they had enough money, whether or not their insurance would cover it, whether or not they could afford to take time off work. It was a constant stressor because of all of the things that were associated with the costs of having this diagnosis. It was heartbreaking to hear, really. And it's not always clear what the resources are. And then in some situations when there's assistance that's available, people were right at a threshold to where they didn't, qualify because they made too much money, but they didn't want to, qualify honestly because they couldn't live. They would be homeless. We talked to women who were homeless because they just couldn't afford to both, stay alive and get their treatment and to pay for their rent or pay for their mortgage.
wow.
Stephanie, I could give you a real live example where I was taking Xgeva shots and the cost of the shot was $430. Now, my husband's an engineer. We're both have been in the professional world. The cost of the shot was $430. The hospital administration, I think I showed you this bill, was $8,500. And after the insurance, we were left to pay $1,700. Now, a lot of people don't pay a $1,700 mortgage. So I went to the doctor and I said, I can't afford to pay that. So what else you got? So for a period of time, they took me off of one bone targeting agent and put me on another one that had a lot less. But people shouldn't have to figure out what it's going to cost them after the fact. They should clearly understand what their treatment options are and what the financial impact is to them. And the doctors should proactively connect them to the resources in their practice so that they can get help.
Right. It shouldn't be, I have to choose. It should be, how do we deal with it, right?
Yes.
Like, what's the plan? So if this is my medication that you're recommending, and I shouldn't have to sacrifice on efficacy, I should get the best thing I can. So what's your plan to make it affordable to me? And frankly, you shouldn't have to pay for it. I mean, it's just crazy. Our system is crazy, but
It's shameful.
Mhm.
And you're right, Ricky. And until such time as American healthcare has been revamped and or overhauled, you know, cancer programs have started to now take a really special interest and offer special training to social workers in the field of something called financial navigation. And so in my cancer program, for example, I have a social worker who used to be oncology and now she just does finance. And so her job is to meet with patients before you show up for your first day of chemo and have to choose, you know, to pay a $10,000 chemo bill or $800 between your mortgage and your car note and your chemotherapy. She is already anticipating what these patients are going to need. She's already looking at their insurance, or if they don't have insurance, what do we have? Looking at our foundation, talking to the companies, trying to figure out how to help patients, you know, pay for their treatment before they get hit with these bills. And the really interesting and sad thing is that there's only one of her. And
Wow.
she is overworked and she takes it home every night and she watches patients have to choose between that last bit of kerosene and that copay or getting that one medication. And it is so heartbreaking for her. But the field of financial literacy, if there are people watching, especially who are in social work or in healthcare, and you're looking for something to get into, that field is hot. There's lots of training and we need you so much.
Wow.
so,
And then there's the people that won't ask for help.
right.
This, you know, they're proud and they've never had to ask for help, and so they don't, and then they suffer horribly.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, Karen. Also related to that, it takes a space where they feel comfortable to ask that help, right? So it takes a healthcare provider that has the bedside manner that makes them comfortable to have these conversations about the side effects, sexual issues, financial issues. If I don't feel comfortable with my healthcare provider, I'm not going to tell you my business. That's already something that we know. Black communities don't talk about things outside of the house. You keep your business private. You've got to be a part of my family or someone I trust to be able to have this conversation with you. So I think it's a broader conversation about the healthcare field being welcoming for these conversations.
Yeah, that goes back to a point we talked about kind of before the show, you guys, that so many Black women with breast cancer don't know another Black woman with breast cancer. And so you're in this environment where you go to chemo and everybody there is white. You don't know another person, but that's a whole outlet of conversation and connection that is missing. And so when you don't have someone to talk to that has what you have or you can share with, and maybe you're not talking to your family about it, you just feel isolated and alone and so I don't know what we can do about that. I mean, that's one thing, we try to be here for people, but if we could tell everybody, call us, we would talk to everybody, it'd be great. But it's hard when when you don't see someone who looks like you in the chemo thing or in the lab, or when, like, how do you make those connections? And even your doctor may not even have another Black patient to
Right.
refer you to, right?
True. Yeah,
So,
I think that's where the Comans come in. That's where the Tiger Lilies come in. That's where the Chrysalis Initiative come in, because we can only amplify the voices for the people that we can reach, but these organizations have a really, really long reach, and I think it's wonderful that their programs are now more diverse than ever before, and that they're amplifying these voices to hopefully connect people. Because you may be sitting in that chair in that infusion center, and you might pick up a pamphlet and you might say, oh, this person looks like me, or that story sounds like mine, and you might find an Instagram or a Facebook group where you can join. And so I think that the movement to expand to everybody across the country, even in those small community cancer centers, and those private infusion centers. It's underway, and we're going to reach them. We just got to keep at it.
Mhm.
And it's almost like we need the nurse navigators and the social workers to know about us so that they can refer patients
Exactly.
to our organizations here. Call Touch, call Ricky, call Nima, call, and
Mhm.
call Jamila and say, or call, you guys have a whole African American initiative at Coleman that,
Mhm.
but I think we have to figure out how to do a better job to make those connections so people can reach out to us, because we're here to help. This is what we do.
Mhm.
We're happy
Mhm.
to help, But and it's amazing to me too that and that this I think came out in your study that Black women don't know the severity of our disease versus white women.
Mhm.
And I don't, I know we don't want to talk about it and bring it up. It's not a happy topic, but I think we have to be educated about it so we ask the right questions to get the right treatments, and that we kind of put our doctors to task and to take care of us maybe differently than they would take care of a white patient, because our disease is more severe. When you start talking triple negative and even our symptoms could be different, our reactions to drugs could be different because we don't have the science to know about it.
Right.
But the doctor needs to pay attention to these things so to give us the best care.
Mhm.
And we have to stand up for ourselves most of the time because we don't have the support system that we need.
Karen, I wonder if you would talk to people who might be watching who say, you know what, I don't want to know all those statistics. I don't want to hear that news. I don't want to, it's going to bring me down. It's going to make me feel disempowered. Is there any advice on how you are able to hear the statistics about metastatic breast cancer, but not internalize it in a way that causes depression, I guess, or that causes you to be
Well,
upset and disrupts your apple cart?
well, I spent my career in the gaming business, so so I'm a betting woman, and so if I know what the odds are, and oftentimes I would say that to my oncologist. So if I do this, what are the chances of what's the percentage chance that this is going to have a negative impact? So for me, the statistics are powerful because they're facts. And I believe in science and I believe in facts. So if the statistics would suggest that I'm going to be better if I walk and that it's going to help my bones, if I exercise, if I eat more healthy, then that's what I'm doing everything that I can do and consuming as much fact-based science that I can to ensure that I live as long as possible and that my quality of life is as good as it can possibly be. So that's the way I look at it.
Odds are in your favor, girl. You go. And they are, but look at you and how you're dealing with it. And, I wish we could make everybody feel hopeful, and that's what we try to
Yes.
do. But it's
Yeah, some people have really aggressive, but even if it's bad news, you got to live today. You got to keep living no matter what the news is and do what we can do to ensure that we're doing everything to make our life as healthy as possible and to live as long as we can. That's the way I look at it. We only get to do this once.
You're right.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, even not being metastatic, we got to live our best life
Absolutely.
and
Mhm.
every day. And I try to do that. But, I think we have to help our sisters. And I feel an obligation to you, my metastatic breast sister, to fight for you. Because you know what I mean? Because maybe I can fight harder. Maybe I have a little more energy today than you. But I think that's why we have the breasty sisterhood that we have.
Mhm.
But we have to figure out how to bring more of us into it and make more people feel comfortable talking about it, and because we're all dealing with the same issues.
You know,
Absolutely.
I think partnering with our churches can be a really great source of support also. And I know that Coleman has done that. Touch continues to every organization. We know that the church and that our spirituality, if it's not a particular religion, is kind of the bedrock of our, our faith is the bedrock of how we live our lives. And Dr. Stephanie, I wonder if you could talk a little bit, if there's results about how people's faith was impacted. And Karen, can you talk a little bit about faith? And, I see it from the other side where sometimes people they hide behind their faith and it holds them back from doing things because they say, you know, I'm gonna leave it in the hands of the Lord, or I'm just gonna let God do X, Y, Z. And how do you switch that thing and turn that faith into action? But Dr. Stephanie, let me start with you and ask you, are there any results from the study about people's faith and their spirituality?
Yeah, faith was a huge theme across all of the focus groups. So many of the women said it was something that helped them cope, and it drew them closer to whatever their spiritual leanings were. This one lady said, "That's where I am right now." She was talking about where she was in her treatment journey, just refocusing and gaining a different aspect in life, because with this diagnosis, I got closer to God. I've grown up in a religious house and everything, but the relationship that I have with God now is completely different. It's so personal. And so women talked about, I'm journaling. They said they were journaling more. They would use their walks as exercise, but also an opportunity to pray and to meditate. And they said, the songs about healing, the scriptures about healing meant something so much deeper now that they were dealing with this diagnosis. When you all were talking earlier about walking into a cancer treatment center and not seeing anyone who looked like you, a Black woman living with metastatic breast cancer, I was also thinking about one of the challenges related to faith that people said was when they were in these support groups, they were in the groups as the only Black person there, and they were coming from this spiritual perspective and talking about God, but they were in a group with other people who were not believers or did not have that same spiritual foundation, right? Because that's a very central tenet of Black communities. And so many of them said, that was further isolating because I have to have my faith to get through this. And these other women are saying, I don't believe in God, or I feel like God did this to me. And so a lot of them said, that was the point where I knew I had to get closer to God, because it had to be me and my relationship with God to get me through this diagnosis. So it was a really common theme throughout.
Well, for me, I'm not a churchgoer, but I think that I'm a very spiritual person, and I'm a good person, and I think that one of the big blessings for me is that I'm a very open person, so I'm able to talk about most anything in the right setting, and so that's been helpful to me. But every morning I get up and I have a set of prayers that I say and affirmations, and then I have a network of about 11 people that I send them spiritual clips every morning. So I look them up at night and I send 11 people 3 or 4 quotes from the Bible. And then I end it with something funny off of YouTube, like maybe a duck and a dog that are friends. So I send this out to 11 people every day, and so the first people that get it are my husband and daughter, then my sister. Then I have a dear friend who was an admin person when I was working, and she and her husband were inseparable, and he recently died. So I said to her, "Do you mind if I add you to the list of people?" And so she said, "Then I have another friend. She's a minister and her friend is the minister's wife, and we're all good friends." I couldn't be more different than some of these people, but they look forward to getting my little messages every morning. And it gives me a chance to, just really be quiet and be thoughtful and to be thankful. Is my life perfect? No, but it's good, and I'm grateful for that. And that's what I try to focus on. I also have friends that are very active in their churches, and they have health education committees. So when Coleman is doing something in the community, or there's an opportunity for me to go and speak at a church on Friends and Family Day, or if they have a session about breast cancer and they invite me, then I'm happy. I'm happy to go. But the church is definitely the center of our community, and I live in Mississippi, so that the church is a big part of the cultural foundation here, and I'm very respectful and grateful for that, because it connects me to people that have huge networks. And when you all send these notes out, I send it to my friends. There's 5 or 6 of them. One works in the hospital. She's a vice president of marketing, and she runs an African American organization, and they send it out to their network. And so that, I think, is a good thing.
And I think one important note that I will add, when we're thinking about Black communities having faith as such a central part, that also means that they're culturally appropriate care, right? The Dr. Mo's of the world have to understand that this has got to be an important part of their treatment. Like the spiritual component is going to be something that they're going to be thinking about. and they're going to be using. And that actually, I mean, we have scientific evidence that spirituality and how we use that to cope with healthcare concerns is beneficial. Meditation, prayer, all of that is beneficial. And so teaching providers to talk about that in a way that is culturally appropriate and responsive to the needs of communities is important.
You are so right. It improves surgical outcomes.
Right.
Patients go into surgery feeling more relaxed when you meditate with them, when they can listen to music that they enjoy, when you pray with them, and they come out and they do better. They have better recovery. They have less nausea. There is good data, like evidence-based. You're absolutely right, Dr. Stephanie, that these things work. But more than that, they help to give those patients and those doctors that bond, right? Because this is a trust relationship. Somebody's getting ready to prescribe a medicine and you're not sure how you're going to do. Your life, your whole life expectancy, all your plans are hinging on what this person is saying and prescribing to you, or what they're going to do to you. They're getting ready to do surgery or some other treatment on you. And that relationship, that bond really should be there. And I don't think we strive enough for that. I think we strive for getting our point across. We strive for giving as much details as a person can handle. We strive for clarity, and we hope that they can remember some of it. And that's as good as we get. And it's just not good enough.
And you're right. There's like a whole range of what the healthcare providers are comfortable with. My oncologist here, she hugs us every time she sees us. I have her cell number. I could text her and she texts me back. At night, on the weekend, I tell her if something's going on. Then my doctor in Ohio, he was much more formal. I hugged him once. I thought he was going to pass out. So I told him, I said, "You saved my life. I'm so grateful to you." And I hugged him, and I thought he was going to faint. It was hilarious.
You got to bring him cookies next time, Karen. You got to bring him your oatmeal raisin cookies.
But yeah, I think, the faith is so important. I remember thinking, okay, I don't know what to pray for. And I said, I have to pray for God's will. And you have to sort of jump off that cliff with God. But also I tell everybody, pray and everything, but do the work.
Yes.
You got to do the work, and God is with
Yes.
you. God is, his hands are within the doctor's hands. He's touching everybody that touches you, and you pray for all the people surrounding you to do the right thing by you. And I think when we were away last week, when somebody said to me, I said something, I always say, faith without works is dead. Told me something, faith without works, and you're dead. So you have to do the work, and you have to, pray for the people doing the work with you. And but we couldn't make it without our spirituality at all. Yeah.
You're right. My screensaver on my phone says, "Let your faith be bigger than your fear."
Yeah.
Because it's not that you're not going to have it, because
Yes.
everybody has fear at some time or another. And it's not, we can pretend like we don't, and we can speak those things into existence as though they weren't and all those things. But, like, this is your life. You can be afraid, but guess what?
Right.
You got to do it anyway. You got to tell your story. You got to participate in that trial. You got to get into that infusion room. You got to wrap your head around this surgery. And on the topic of that, I guess that resilience, because, with metastatic breast cancer, Karen, I want you to weigh in, because it ebbs and flows, right? As it sinks in every holiday, every year that passes, every friend who maybe passes on. Like, how do you manage the psychological, how do you manage to stay stable? How do you manage good mental health? Because, Dr. Stephanie, I think that one of your quotes talked about, somebody ringing the bell and how that really impacted them. I wonder if you could share that quote with us.
I'll find it in just a second.
I have it right here.
Okay.
Somebody rang the bell just for the first time. It just set off something within me. And I just burst into tears. I realized I would never be able to ring that bell. That's a scary thought.
Wow. That's really something. Well, I guess, when I think about, just like the lady I told you just died a couple weeks ago, I met her about a year and a half ago, and she had written this book, and she gave one to me, and she autographed it, and then I shipped her some cookies. But she had been through rounds and rounds of chemo, and I haven't had any of that. So I do know when the 15th of March comes around every year, that's the anniversary of when I found out that I was metastatic. So yes, people pass away around me, but I just try to stay busy and use all that I have. So I'm in the community doing all kind of work. I'm doing diversity, equity, inclusion work. I do fundraisers for our community. One of them is a CEO talent show where all the CEOs dance at the Hard Rock Casino and the money goes to the United Way. I created and trademarked that event. I do leadership training. I'm busy. I just try to really stay busy. That's how I keep my head on. But when I'm tired, I take the time to rest. I'm not a big drinker, but every once in a while I'll have a cocktail, and the whiskey blueberry mash is my favorite. And and I walk. Well, since our daughter's been here, we probably walk 3 days a week, 2.5 miles, and that's that's really wonderful. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. And when she wasn't here, I started walking. I was really helpful to me. I like to go out to community events. Today I went to lunch. It was a Lighthouse Business and Professional Women's Organization, and they had a luncheon. It's an organization that I've been involved with. Matter of fact, they named their annual award after me. So I just keep busy out and about, and I try to focus outward as opposed to inward. And then even with my joint pain, I have friends that have arthritis and their fingers are curled up. So it could be worse. So I just think to myself, Karen, you gotta stay strong. You gotta stay focused. You gotta stay positive. And you know yourself, I'm pretty strong. I can bear a lot, and I'm really grateful for that.
That's good. And, you are so blessed that you didn't have to do chemo, and you are, and you're kind of managing all of your symptoms as well,
Mhm.
in a great way. I just, I wish we could, pour some of that love into some of our other breasties who are suffering and in
Are
pain,
really suffering. Yep.
having a hard time with symptoms and side effects. And but again, it is a lot of it is attitude. It's how do you, you
Mhm.
know, maybe you feel bad for this hour, but maybe next hour you'll have 5 minutes of not feeling so bad and you go stand outside.
Mhm.
I would tell everybody, walking to me is one of the best things. I walk to Starbucks every morning, walk 3 miles, but it's you see God all around you. Whether it's cold, raining, I will only not walk if it's pouring. I will walk in the rain, the snow, whatever. But because you see God, and it's just, I'm looking for the blessing.
Right. That's right. You
Yes,
notice
you
things that
will.
you didn't notice. The birds singing,
The birds, right? We take
the
for
the
granted.
skyline, the sunsets. Yeah, yeah,
Let me
it's
tell you
it's it's really
something.
something. And
I have
listen,
gone.
I went through a realm of things. I couldn't take tamoxifen. I couldn't tolerate it. I couldn't take Arimidex. I couldn't tolerate it. So, I had to go through a series of things to get to this place. But I told my doctor, I can't take that. I can't take it. It's making me too sick. And then finally we got to a combination of things that worked, and I've been stable. So I'm so grateful for that. And I share that every time with my friends. I'm going for my scans tomorrow, pray. And then when the scan results come in, I send them out and everybody is delighted. I get all kind of emojis and stuff. So yeah. But I know I'm very lucky.
But you work, you're blessed, but also you're working with your doctor. You're saying, you know what? This isn't working for me. What have you got? And so many of
Mhm.
us get intimidated in that office. That rushes in. You got 5 minutes. How you doing? Whatever. Like, and check your vitals, but they're not talking to you. And so we have to stand up and advocate for ourselves because
Absolutely.
the doctor doesn't really have time. And so I think that, and I don't know if that even came out in the study, Stephanie, but say, hold on, this is not working for me. What have you got? And really have the conversation with your doctor. So, and we know every doctor isn't like our Dr. Mo, who will, go out of her way to help you. But that's why you have to stand up for yourself
Mhm.
and say, hold on, what else can we try? Is there
Mhm.
a clinical trial that could work for me? Is there something that can relieve my bone pain in a different way? No, I don't want to take the opioid. What else have you got?
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of the women talked about having to learn to do that, especially the people who were not diagnosed de novo. Like they had to say, okay, this advocacy has to be different. At an earlier stage, perhaps I could just take more of what you're saying and go with it. But now I have to learn my body. I have to become some of the people said I had to become a scientist and
Mhm.
learn the science of metastatic breast cancer. And so to your point about clinical trials, we were just talking earlier today. And one of the people said, I didn't know that I could tell them, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I didn't know I could ask questions or ask to see my data or ask to see the overall, like, what are the findings currently? So having to learn, you have power over your body, over your health, over your journey, I think is a process that women are learning, and I love to see it.
Nothing makes me happier than when a patient comes in and says, okay, but doc, I read about this, this, and this, and this. So tell me about this. And, there are those doctors who they do this and they got their hand on the doorknob. That's the wrong doctor for you. But the ones who sit down and say, okay, tell me what you read. What did you understand? And here's why this is right, or here's why this is not a good source. Like, I love those conversations because that helps me to understand that my patient is tuned in and they're tapped in and they're trying to wrap their heads around what's going on, that they're looking for information, that they want to take this thing that happened to them and now do something with it. Right? Whether it's just empowering their kids and their family or educating themselves, or whether they're having meetings at their church or they're involved in support groups, like that to me is the beauty and the blessing, if it could be called a blessing. But that part of it is the blessing of cancer, is that we get to now be a blessing to others. We get to take this tragedy and transform it. And that to me is a really beautiful thing. But you're right. Not enough women, I think, find their voice. They don't know that they can do that.
Mhm.
And women talked about that too when you're talking about the blessing of cancer. And it was kind of surprising to me, but like this selfless idea of saying, maybe this clinical trial is not going to benefit me. It likely won't. But my daughters and my sons and the people coming behind me will benefit from me sharing my data, sharing my tissue. That was common across all of the focus groups as well. Like finding a higher purpose. And most of the women said, I feel like if God allowed this to come, then there is a purpose that's bigger than me and I've got to find it. And so to Karen's point, Karen is always on the move, and they were too. They were always doing something, finding a way to be purposeful about this diagnosis to help other people. And that was also very inspiring.
When you share your story and you model what's possible, even in difficult circumstances, I think it lifts people up. Every time I have an opportunity to speak, someone will come to me and say, you know what, this really touched my husband. He just got diagnosed with cancer. So yeah. So for me, I think I have a responsibility to do all I can to show what's possible as long as I can, and just keep going.
I love that. I love that. Model what's possible.
Mhm.
I love that.
Boy,
We all have to do model what's
that's
possible.
powerful.
That is,
Mhm.
I'm stealing those words from you. That's going to be
Mhm.
fun.
Okay.
But yeah, because we do that, we have to encourage each other.
Mhm.
That okay, girl, I know you're not feeling well, but call a breastie,
Mhm.
and get some
Mhm.
breastie love, because it's a club that we don't want to be in, but once we're in it, it's like that unconditional love that I can't even describe, right? But
And there's scientific evidence for that as well. The social support of other people who are dealing with a similar journey is beneficial for your healthcare outcomes. And it's really important to share. I mean, it was breaking my heart to hear so many people say, other people don't know about this diagnosis, because there is power in just sharing your story, giving your testimony, like we say in church, being able to be affirmed by people who have similar life experiences is important.
Mhm.
Dr. Stephanie, can I ask you, do you think that that's something that maybe we could look into as a next phase for this research, into looking at what has been the effect of us sharing our stories, especially as Black women, because we know that our testimony, our stories has power, but has anybody ever really looked at that in our community and how effective it's been on either health literacy or compliance or attitudes about cancer and depression, anything like that? That'd be kind of interesting.
It would be. There are very little data about Black women with breast, or Black people with breast cancers, and even less about metastatic breast cancer. So I do think it's important. At Komen, so all the people who participated in My Own Voice had an opportunity to sign up for this closed Facebook group. So they have an opportunity to share and talk with each other, and we get out of their business. If they need us, they can let us know, but they have an opportunity across the US to have conversations and share information and to talk about, I think the latest conversation, Karen, you might have seen in there, they were talking about the vaccines and sharing like what their concerns were and what, their doctor is telling them. So having a space where they have people who look like them having these conversations, I think is important. And we do need to have more research about it.
Mhm. Good point.
And we have to really, I mean, I think that if we could validate that, but there's so many, you brought up earlier that you didn't know what the word metastatic meant.
Mm-mm.
And it's almost like we need a lot of this education before we get sick. And
Mhm.
that's where, we need to be having these, what we call these kitchen table conversations in our Black houses where we don't talk about health. So this stuff shouldn't be a surprise.
Mhm.
When you get sick, all of a sudden you don't even know what you're up against. It should be something, and like, who wants to talk about cancer? Who wants to talk about being sick? But then if you know nothing, you walk into this mess and you're like hit like a truck, right? So at least having some knowledge about it. So we have this great HBCU internship program, and we're trying to teach these young women. They're all sort of STEM students, pre-med, pre-nursing, and we talk to them. They know nothing about health, about breast health, and so we believe that they could be not only helping their peers, but be the conduit into the families. Hey, mama, do you know about this? Hey, grandma, did you get a mastectomy? So I think we all owe it to our families to talk to the young women in our lives and educate them and spread this word early in their lives so that they're not like hit at 40. Oh my God, now what do I do? Who do I call? What do I talk to? So we just have to keep talking.
Being honest, yeah, being honest about our family health history, I think it's important.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Sorry.
with mental illness, like not, the culture sometimes in some faith communities, if I don't say it, if I don't name it, I'm not claiming it.
Right.
But no, you still have breast cancer. You still have metastatic breast cancer. And how can, if we're talking about Christian communities, how can we talk about healing if we're not naming what we are actually living with? And the two can't coexist. So it is important to have those family conversations, but also acknowledge the faith tradition, but also talk about how we can incorporate that in our healing process and our journey.
Wow, you're
Well, the
right.
other
And
thing,
give your faith a chance to really work, right? Put that faith
Mhm.
to action.
We need more we need more Black doctors too, in this, not only in this space, but period. And I think it's the University of Tennessee was recruiting African-American male students. So there's a lot of young people that have great minds and the capacity to be doctors in this space. And we got to find them and support them. And I think that's a big deal because I'm sure that Stephanie will tell you that outcomes are different if depending on what your medical doctor looks like. And there again has to do with somebody like you, that there's a baseline of trust already established just because they look like you and they're a professional in this lane. So having more Black doctors in oncology is really, and surgery, oncology surgery, Dr. Mo, that's really important. You spoke earlier today briefly about surgery versus non-surgery and how people make these decisions. Could you share a little bit of that?
You know what, I'd be glad to. And what I said was that, it's important to find doctors who will look at you on an individual case by case basis, because when you're dealing with metastatic breast cancer, or really with every breast cancer, it's different, it's unique, even if all the hormone receptors are the same, even if the diagnosis is the same. And so finding a doctor who knows when to operate versus when to not do surgery, right? Because every surgeon loves to operate, but every patient doesn't need a surgery. Every radiation doctor loves to give radiation and they want to help, they want to do their part, but every patient doesn't need radiation. And finding those doctors who can look at you for you and tell you what you need and help you avoid what you don't is so very important. And that's what I love about when you said you went to Ohio, because it wasn't just I went to the next center to get, the best thing, but I found doctors who looked at my individual case and who were able to give me a prescription. Like, this is the era of personalized medicine. And my wish for Black women and for Black people is that we would find doctors who could help personalize our medicine. Even if we do have to get chemo, can it be less toxic? Can it be a different regimen? How do we navigate this just for you? Not all the people and all the studies and all the earth from the beginning of time, but the person in front of you. And that's where we got to get to. And I think that when you find Black doctors, at least my hope is that more often than not, they see you because they see themselves. They see their loved ones. I see my mother. I see my sister,
Yep.
Yeah.
One of the quotes that came up to us that there's a difference just interacting with other white women who have been diagnosed. the access, the seriousness. Oftentimes I say the doctors don't know how to manage Black women's pain. The response is different. The expectations that we can handle it, we can deal, we're strong enough to deal with it. So there's some conversations that may not be held, and there's some assumptions that are made just based on the color of our skin. So are the doctors seeing us for who we are? And interesting, Stephanie, I think I asked you this when I first read your data, that a lot of the women, like 80-something% of the women that were in the study said, yes, I trust my doctor. Yes, I got good care. But then when you got them into a room together and they started talking and sharing, like, hold on, wait a minute, like my doctor didn't do that. And the whole trust conversation changes because they see stuff they were missing, right? So it's almost like we want to expect the doctors to do right by us. We want to expect to have good care. But then but we don't even know what good care means until we get in a room and people can compare. Oh, well, I didn't get that drug. Oh, I didn't have that conversation. I didn't get that shot. I didn't know about that. Then you're like, hold on, maybe I didn't get good care.
Mhm.
And that's why talking to each other is so important, and feeling comfortable being your own advocate. Let's be honest here. There's generations, even though a doctor intellectually thinks that he's not biased, implicit bias goes back generations. And the way that meds are prescribed, the way the doctor even engages with us about the use of pain medicine is different than the way that they'll talk to somebody else.
Talk about
So
that.
we have to be so conscious of this and really stand up for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of data about implicit bias in healthcare. And anecdotally, to your point, Ricky, about this story, the woman, if I remember correctly, but this happened at several times, people were talking about actually experiencing their same doctor treating them differently from a white patient. And so this one woman described how they were in the circle and she literally had to go over to the white woman who was getting the same type of treatment that she was and be like, what did the doctor tell you? Because that's my doctor. And I heard him sharing something with you that he didn't tell me. And I think that might be helpful. And so women talked about, while I would like to be in a support group with more Black women, I go to these support groups so I can find out information that I know is not being
That's
told.
smart.
And otherwise,
Right.
wow.
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 It's crazy.
Wow.
Mm.
So much
Wow.
work to do here. So much work to do. I say that every day. Wow.
Dr. Stephanie, what comes next from this study?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about how to take this and do something else with it?
So the biggest thing that we've already started doing at Komen is making sure that Black women are at the table. We always talk about, nothing for us without us, nothing that's, targeted in our communities without our input. Because I think, whether you're talking about reviewing grants or you're talking about planning programs, having someone at the table who has the lived experience of a Black woman living with metastatic breast cancer changes the whole dynamic. It forces people to think about things differently than, maybe a standard room with just, non-Black people. So I think it's really important to think about how we can have everyone at the table. And then policy and legislation. Like our policy and advocacy team talks a lot about making sure legislation is targeting the communities that are the most disparate in health outcomes and having the most marginalized outcomes. And so I think it's important to go at all levels of we talk about the social ecological model of health. We can't just say, eat right and exercise. That is important at the individual level. But we also have to think about changing systems to make sure that they are patient friendly, making sure that they're giving care that is meeting the needs of all communities, and then they're having policy to support that, having insurance that's covering those treatments. So looking at it more holistically, putting the marginalized communities, Black women, at the forefront of our conversations and how we're thinking about it is really important. I think that's the big next step.
Wow, that's a huge step. That's an important step.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even partnering with you, like it's a great thing. We're partnering with you on our research, and so with Komen and just having like these alliances with Black organizations, I think is also going to help us, leveraging all of our audiences to get the message across. So
Absolutely. Well,
And if
Karen,
we
what's bringing you joy these days?
well,
Because I ask all my patients that, what brings you joy?
well, a lot. When my family brings me joy, we love to cook and bake. I do a program called Pathways to Possibilities in 5 locations across the state of Mississippi, exposing 8th graders to careers so they don't drop out of school. I've learned so much between, what parts of the state we live in. There's so much brilliance in our children, and they're not all going to be doctors and lawyers, but every single one of them has gifts that can be developed so they can be contributing members of our society. And we have to make sure that we do everything that we can to help them. So since 2013, we've hosted 95,000 Mississippi kids at these hands-on career expos. We have doctors, we have lawyers, we have them climbing the electric poles. We had a birthing mannequin. We have animals in agriculture. So every career pathway that's possible, we have lots of companies that come and speak to these kids and try to get them on a good path. So that really inspires me, because I was a kid who had intelligent parents, but I was not the least bit interested in going to college. I went to every single party, got sent home on academic suspension, and went on to be the first African-American woman in the nation to run a casino for a major gaming company. So I know that we all learn different ways, and that we all have different gifts, and that we can pull people along with us.
Incredible.
This
Wow.
is what metastatic breast cancer in a Black woman looks like. Okay. Okay. Do we need to say more?
Mhm.
You rock,
Wow.
girl. You love it.
Yeah. Wow. What else is there to say?
I know. I think we're done. I think we gotta
The
go.
doors of the church are open. I don't know. But you certainly have left me feeling inspired, to reach out, to do more, to share my story more, to educate more people, to get involved. And I think if people are watching, if you don't take anything else away from this, is that whoever you are, wherever you live, whatever you know, whatever you don't, your story has power. It definitely does. And we need your voice. We need your participation, your involvement. We need your spirit, your sunshine, your prayers. We need your laughter, all of it, because we have to take care of each other. We got to look out for each other.
Dr. Mo, we're proud of you. I'm gonna tell you, you and Stephanie, y'all are some bad sisters, because there's not a lot of you, and you're setting a wonderful example for these young people, and we're very grateful.
We're blessed to be a blessing.
Can't do it without you.
In your own voice, in our own voice, we got to make those voices happen. So Steph, can people get more information from you? How do they reach you to get more information if they want to learn more about the study? Or
Sure, you can email me at smccoy@komen.org if you have any questions about it. We have a website. The Komen website has more information about what we're doing in the broader African American community, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to that as well.
Beautiful.
And Karen,
Yes.
how can people reach you?
Oh, I'm Karen Sock 52@gmail.com. And I had to get off Facebook. They kept hacking me. But you can find me on LinkedIn.
Are you on the Twitter? People been asking in the chat.
No,
Are you
I'm not on Twitter. No.
Instagram?
Girl, I'm trying to manage all these social all these social technology things. Girl, it's something.
Well, we can get people to you. We can always call us and we'll hook you up.
Yes, absolutely. Stephanie knows how to find me.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
We know how to find Stephanie. We know how to find you. We'll find you.
Yes, that's
Okay.
right. Ricky will find you. Let me tell you.
Absolutely. It turned out that Ricky's daughter and my niece are friends. They went to school together. Isn't that funny?
Isn't that
Who
great?
would have thunk?
Wow.
We're all
Get
Yeah.
out of here.
Because the older you get, I think there's only 1 degree of separation between Black people, and the older we get. But isn't that
That's true.
Yeah.
Might not even be one half the time. Wow.
Connected. We're all connected. We're all connected.
If you talk long enough, you'll find the connection for sure.
It's true.
Right?
It's true.
Right.
And what a beautiful tapestry. Wow. We want to thank our sponsors. We hope this has been relatable and reliable information, and real information is what we set out to do every single Wednesday night, right, Ricky?
Right, we do. And next week we're going to do the remix on our rainbow table, our rainbow table talk, and
Absolutely.
have some more LGBT conversations for Pride Month, and got a lot of work to do in that vein. So thank you.
Equity for all.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. You got to come back.
Thank you all for your commitment. This is a big commitment every week. Good for you. Thank you.
We love it. It's our best hour of the week, isn't it, Mo? We love
It's true. And one more thing before we go, we got to say, Ricky, happy 65th birthday.
Happy birthday.
This woman right here walks circles around you. I know, because I wore the wrong shoes and went walking with her one good time. One good time. And she walks circles around me. But I thank God for you. And we are just so blessed that you have the heart and the mind and the will to do this work. So happy birthday, baby.
Happy
I
birthday.
love you.
Many more.
Thank you.
All right.
The doctor is in.
I didn't think I would see this one, so here I am.
There it is.
Yep, Breasty love.
Breasty
Breasty
love.
love. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.